Hello everyone, y muy buenos dias. Today I'm going to show you how to make a chickpea pasta from scratch that is totally vegan. No need to purchase from the store anymore unless you're gluten-free because this recipe uses some semolina flour. So start by mixing completely in a blender until completely smooth 2 cups of chickpeas and 2 cups of vegetable broth. When it's completely smooth, you're going to take semolina flour. I didn't measure this, but I created a little mound, and you're gonna create a well just as you would if you were to make pasta with eggs and egg yolks. But instead of using eggs, we're gonna dump this chickpea mixture into the mix. So if people are gonna ask you, where do you get your protein from in your pasta dishes, tell them that you made your noodles from scratch from some beans. And then they will be left with their mouth open, looking at your extravagance and your ability to create pasta from scratch as a vegan. So dump this into the middle and then take a fork and lightly combine it, and once it's starting to come together, just take the outer edges, put it into the middle of the circle, and then start to knead by hand. Pasta dough is extremely glutinous, and that's what gives it its firm texture, and we're going to try and do that by kneading for about 5 to 10 minutes when it starts to come together. Once it's come to a relatively kneaded position and it's really tacky, the dough has a nice tacky surface, let it rest for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we're gonna make the pasta into some spaghetti noodles. I'm going to show 2 different methods of doing this. Honestly, the first method is more a fettuccine noodle than anything, but you're going to roll a section of the dough quite flat with a rolling pin, pretty standard, and then dust it with semolina flour, roll it up into a cigarillo looking shape, and then cut off individual sections. Your thickness is of course dependent on how thin you want your noodles, but I made them relatively thick and they're kind of looking like fettuccine noodles. The second method is taking some of the dough and then dusting it in some flour and putting it through a pasta maker, like an old school pasta maker, not those electric ones that cost like $120. Those I will save for another time after I buy one because they're probably awesome and save you tons of time. But either way, cut off a section, flatten it a little bit with your hand, and then start on the largest setting of your pasta maker, run it 1 or 2 times, and then continuously get to the more slender options on your pasta maker until your pasta is pretty thin. This way and this method actually creates thinner pasta and makes spaghetti making much faster. I normally tend to do a fettuccine noodle if I'm rolling it by hand and a rolling pin because it's simply easier and it doesn't stick as much. So continue to do this, and then with this specific Imperio pasta maker, you have to then attach the noodle shape, which I chose to use a spaghetti noodle shape. And then once you have your sort of very slender, flat pieces of pasta, I cut off a section, make it a bit smaller, a more manageable noodle size. You don't want these gigantic pasta noodles, and then run it through the specific shapes channel, right? And so when you do this, afterwards you're going to take your noodles, dust them in a little bit more semolina flour or brown rice flour, both work excellently, and then hang them to dry or make them into bundles. To be honest, the bundle method never works for me. It honestly always sticks. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I think I just don't let them dry enough. If this method works for you, go ahead, do it. But I choose to and prefer to dry it on a rack. Season some broccoli, cherry tomatoes, yellow squash, artichoke hearts, and button mushrooms pre-cut. Obviously, I didn't show this in the video. And then we're going to add some olive oil, some garlic powder, black pepper, and salt, and crushed red pepper. These are very basic seasonings. You can add as much as you want. I tend to add a lot of garlic powder, try to stay away from too much salt. You're going to bake them in your oven with some parchment paper at 425 degrees for 20 to 25 minutes until they're completely cooked, mixing halfway to make sure that everything browns evenly. And of course, once you're done, you're gonna boil your pasta as one would, pretty standard. These spaghetti noodles don't take very long to cook. They take about 1 minute and 2 minutes, especially if you're baking them or cooking them fresh. If you dry them out completely, they'll take a little longer. Drain them, of course, rinse them, and then add whatever pasta sauce you want and the vegetables of your choice, and enjoy. Dig in.